waited a few days to do a evaluation of the season and also just discuss some other topics of Rutgers basketball and really just kind of looking forward here and looking at the future and what the outlook is, what I think Steve Pikiell and the program needs to do moving forward, and overall just the state of things. It's not good. It's not good. They finished 15-17, announcing on Sunday they would not play in the postseason. Many rant to start. I've been a proponent of, or I guess an antagonist of the idea of bowl games for college football. The fact that there's so many 80 plus teams out of 130 Division I FBS teams that go to a bowl game. You know, some teams have a 5-7 record due to academics go. And I never understood it. I didn't think it made sense. And now we live in a world where college basketball is poisoned in the same well with the fact that teams with losing records can go to postseason tournaments. Obviously, not the NCAA tournament, but the NIT. Now you have the Crown, CBI, the Rutgers women's basketball, respectfully, going to the women's NIT with an 11-19 record. Rutgers reportedly invited to the NIT and turned it down. Personally, if that's what we're getting upset about these days, we are not in the modern era of college basketball. We are not in the mindset of the modern era of college basketball. And that is anything outside of the NCAA tournament doesn't matter. And the idea that, players should have chosen to compete above all else is not in line with the modern, I think, psyche of college basketball players, sadly or not, but also just in terms of modern times. It's not how the world operates within college basketball anymore. The transfer portal opens on March 24th. If the NCAA did not want that mindset, then they wouldn't have the transfer portal open in the middle of the postseason. It's ridiculous, but it exists. And because of that, you cannot participate in a non-NCAA tournament event when you have a losing record, because the priority should be you rebuild for next season. The whole idea of the benefit of player development, playing in these tournaments, I mean, the reality is in the transfer portal, you're losing 2/3 of your roster. So any player development is either moot by them leaving, by them not even playing because they're in the transfer portal already, or yes, you might have a couple players that benefit from it, but it doesn't negate the fact that it's more important to get a jump on the following season's roster and to put all your energy and effort into that rather than trying to get back to 500 in the NIT. And I know that might disappoint some people, or some people don't agree with that philosophy. But for me, and also on top of the way this team played down the stretch, it was painful. And I was just content as could be that after that USC loss, it was over. And the most important thing right now is Steve Pikiell evaluating what happened, Steve Pikiell evaluating what needs to change within this program, and evaluating how they're going to get back to being a winning program. Because the bottom line is they've had 2 losing records in a row, losing seasons. They haven't made the NCAA tournament now 3 years in a row. They've had plenty of bad luck along the way. But every program deals with adversity. And Rutgers has had less success overcoming that adversity in recent years than they did prior. And a lot of that is roster dynamics, having guys that were 3-4 years in the program. We know, the Mount Rushmore of the Steve Pikiell era with Gio and Ron Harper Jr., Caleb McConnell, Miles Johnson. You had Jacob Young, obviously Cliff, Paul Mulcahy, real program staple guys there 2, 3, 4 years. And that just doesn't exist anymore. And I think that is, if there's a question or concern about Steve Pikiell moving forward, it's he had success in that format, in that way. And that format is no longer a viable option. So can he adapt? Will he adapt? And can he turn things around? Now, the idea that he doesn't deserve a chance to turn things around, I think, is unfair. I think a lot of people have anger towards this past season. I think it's fair to be upset. I mean, obviously, I'm upset. I've been upset for a long time. I saw, I don't normally have my spirit beaten out of me, but this team, by the end of February, I knew it wasn't happening. But I think that there's extremes in everything, right? And first of all, and I've mentioned this, but the idea that Rutgers could even fire Steve Pikiell if they wanted to right now, with no president, no AD, is just not realistic. But I think what a lot of people miss here, and I'm kind of rambling, I'm kind of getting all over the place. What people miss here is it's not just about having money to replace your coach. It's about having the proper investment to draw in worthy coaches that are going to elevate your program. Because making a change for the sake of change doesn't make sense. And that's why I think giving up on Steve Pikiell in this moment is a bit short-sighted, because I don't think Rutgers, unless they land a needle in a haystack, is going to get coaches with, I think, could elevate this program in a quick way without having a significant increase in financial commitment to the program. Now let's talk about this season, right? Because a lot went wrong. And I talked about before this season. We're going to go back to that. Again, I'm rambling. This is off the cuff. I don't even have bullet points tonight. This is all from the heart. This is all from the head. This is months of just kind of pent up frustration and thoughts on this program and where things are headed and how they kind of ended up off the tracks. But I think that in terms of this season, some of the most frustrating things is that they did not evolve. They did not improve. They did not develop. In fact, their defense statistically was worse at the end of the season than it was midway and earlier in the season. Their offense got better. Their defense got worse. It's the worst defensive efficiency team in the Steve Pikiell era. It's the best offensive efficiency team. But at the end of the day, they had no identity. They were consistently inconsistent. And there wasn't a lot to harp on in terms of what they were good at as a team on a consistent basis. They had flashes, but I think that was the biggest thing in terms of you really didn't recognize this Steve Pikiell team. And obviously Dylan and Ace are transformational talents, generational players at the college level in terms of NBA futures. I know there's a lot of Facebook fans out there that don't think they're ready, that don't see why they're projected to be lottery picks, but they clearly are. They clearly have a ton of potential. And I think with Steve Pikiell, the staff just really missed in terms of how to utilize those guys the best, in terms of how to support them with the cast around them, and just utilization of the players they had. We talk about roster construction and they picked the wrong guys. But I think that's true to a large extent. But I think that also true is, even so, the players that you had, you didn't really try or appear to prioritize getting them involved in terms of focusing on the strengths, right? I don't think Zach Martini was utilized properly. He's a catch and shoot shooter. They really didn't do a lot of that. They did more towards the end of the season, and he shot better. When you don't see things, we talked about the Ace and Dylan two-man game, right? The high pick and roll at the top of the key. I mean, how many times did it happen? I don't have synergy or anything. If anybody does, look it up. But, I mean, did it happen 5 times all season? I don't think it did. The pressing that was effective at times, for large swaths of the season, did not even attempt it. When you see certain players making the same mistakes over and over again, Jordan Durkak driving into 3 defenders repeatedly, finally, lost a lot of playing time because of it. Lathan Somerville shooting 15 footers without just putting the rock on the floor and attacking the rim and slamming it down someone's throat. Repeatedly settled for 15 footers because he was open, which is what the defense is doing on purpose. It just wasn't a smart team on the court. They lacked leadership on the court. They lacked everything on the court. And I think, defensively, listen, and I took some slack lately. Dylan Harper offensively was, I think, as polished a college basketball player as there is going into the NBA. Defensively, he not only did not get better, but he was far below the level that I thought he would be as a defender. And that was hugely disappointing. And as much focus and discussion on Rutgers having a lack of rim defender this year, which was true, obviously Cliff leaving, what I always envisioned, and people ask me, why did you get it so wrong? Why do you think this team is going to be good? A big reason I thought this team was going to be good was I really thought with the size and length they had on the perimeter that they were going to be extremely disruptive on the defensive end, that they were going to create a lot of turnovers, that they were going to force a lot of bad shots, they were going to get opponents to start their offense farther away than the rim than they wanted to. I thought that they would work opponents down in the shot clock and they would have to settle, and that length would be really disruptive. I did not know or think that this team would be deficient in closing out on threes, unable to stop penetration, unable to rotate as a defensive unit, unable to fight through screens, not pressing nearly enough as I thought they would. And that to me was the biggest stunner. And I think Steve Pikiell recruited guys from an offensive perspective. And I think some of it was out of necessity, right? NIL was limited. And I think that's a misconception about this team, that they were built around this huge NIL number because they have Dylan and Ace. Not true. Dylan could have gone anywhere and accumulated a ton of NIL outside of Rutgers. Ace as well. And did get more, I think, than Dylan did from Rutgers. But at the same time, they did not only did they not have enough money to compete with the top of the conference and other top schools. That's one issue. That's not an excuse for why the season was so bad. The other excuse is that they did a very poor job of player evaluation. They did not maximize their dollars. When you have less money from an NIL perspective, you have to nail your player evaluations, and they did not do that. So there's lots of reasons why. There's lots of fault to go around. And, the whole NIL thing, and I'm in and out here, I know, I'm bobbing and weaving, I'm zigging and zagging. But, yes, it is fair to say that Pat Hobbs set this program up because it was used as an excuse for football. When football had a bad October, right, and players were hurt, what did we hear? They need more better players. They need more NIL. The AD failed them. Well, guess what? The AD failed basketball too because he did not have them set for position success. They did not put every possible resource into building this roster. That being said, Steve Pikiell did a poor job of building the roster, and he did a worse job of utilizing the roster he built. Those are all facts. You don't have to separate the fact that, NIL is an excuse. Well, no, it's a fact. It's a factor. It's something that helps you get better. And they did a poor job in it. Steve Pikiell's partly to blame there. Rutgers as an institution, which we'll get to in a minute, but that's part of my concern moving forward. I don't think they get it. And talking about the GM position and all that, and I'm not concerned now because it's not posted. They have to be working on it. But the point is, the decision should have been made in January. The portal opens in less than a week now, or a week, and you don't have someone in place. And this person that's going to be in place, right? Whether they handle women's and men's basketball, not too concerned about that. It's more of the allocation of duties. right? Are they a fundraiser? Are they managing the portal from a cap perspective with your NIL, from a player evaluation standpoint? Or are they just more administrative? Part of that's going to have to do with Rutgers administration and Ryan Passari and how he envisions it, how Pikiell envisions it. But I think what you really need is you need someone from the basketball world that understands the recruiting circles, that has deep contacts, that can help this program expand its reach. And that's a big message I have, is that I really hope Steve Pikiell, in evaluating the need for change, is expanding your reach in every aspect. He's created a very insulated world within the program. And, it is hard to see that as the program has gotten better, you see him insulating himself more from criticism, from change. And I personally, respectfully, don't think that that's a healthy thing for the program or for him as a coach. And I hope that if there's a theme to think about, it's expanding reach, right? Whatever changes you make, whether it's coaching staff, which I, respectfully, I mean, when you have back-to-back losing seasons, when you had the talent you had with Ace and Dylan and you have a losing record, I don't know how you can't consider making changes. And I know Pike was loyal to, honestly, I think a fault, because you could still be loyal to someone. You can still be good to someone, but maybe they're not a fit anymore. And maybe you can help them land in a great spot. But in terms of where this staff is, obviously things weren't clicking this year, right? Because the team didn't get better. They got worse. And that has to be part of the evaluation. So I hope expanding the network, right? Looking to add people to your staff that are outside of your comfort zone, that will bring different opinions, different views, and help this program grow. That from an NIL perspective, you could bring someone in that has reach, that can grow the donor base, that isn't just reliant on the Rutgers donor base. That well seems pretty dry right now. And you need someone that's managing your NIL, whether it's a GM position or whatever it is, that understands the basketball world. That when they're pursuing a player, they have contacts and they know what that player's market. That's the real job of a GM, right? In pro sports, is assessing the value of your own players, assessing the value of players on the open market, assessing the value of players on other teams that you want to trade for. And are you making a good deal? Are you benefiting your roster in the long term by the deals you're making? And you need someone that understands player evaluation, that understands that, hey, this transfer from, VCU, right? What's his real value? What is he being offered for real, right? Do I know someone else that's offering him? And what is the real figure there versus the phony figure, right? And able to understand not only what will fit for Steve Pikiell, the type of player that he needs, that excel in his system. You need someone that understands that. And two names that come to mind, former coaches, Shoes, Patrone, and for me, that makes so much sense, right? He's been so connected in the world of college basketball for years. He was at UNLV back in the day, back in the good old days. And, listen, I'm not endorsing Fred Hill, but it's that type of guy, right? Two longtime assistants that have worked in multiple circles, have multiple contacts, understand the recruiting world, even as it evolves now, and has a ton of reach. Now, Shoes is a little counterproductive to what I'm saying, because he worked for Steve Pikiell and he was at Rutgers 7 years. But if you're looking to hit the ground running, right, he offers the best of both worlds, because he's not just a Pikiell guy. He wasn't a Pikiell guy when Pikiell got here. He did an amazing job, in helping him with Sanders, Corey Sanders, Deshaun Freeman. But his scope is much greater than the Pikiell orbit. And mentioning someone like Fred Hill is just, someone that is embedded in the recruiting world, the coaching world, and it's that type of profile. That's what I mean. I don't mean Fred Hill. Don't hire Fred Hill. Please don't. But that type of profile, that's what they need to be thinking. You have to be ahead of the game in every step. When your dollars are less than others, right? And revenue share, yes, they're going to get revenue share money. I think it's probably going to be between 3 and 4 million. And the Big Ten schools, that's probably going to be pretty typical, right? Because football is going to get the bulk of it. But the top Big Ten schools are going to have that NIL weight behind it. It's inflation, right? A guy that was 500,000 last year is going to be 750 this year. So just because you have more money with revenue share, everybody has more money. And if you don't think the Big East schools are going to have more money than Rutgers, you're wrong. And because they don't have football. So they have to maximize every dollar they have. And you need to do that with an open mind, with a changed approach, with knowledgeable people helping Steve Pikiell make this decision on who to bring in and the players they consider. It can't just be, guys from Michigan that smoke nose and, guys that the recruiters know from a connection here or there. They need player evaluation. Yes, connections help. Getting guys in your circle that you know other coaches from. Yes, you have to do that, right? But at the same time, they have to have some player evaluations because even with the lack of money they had last year, there were plenty of transfers that went to mid-majors that were successful. I mean, if you want to look at roster evaluation, player evaluation, the staff that did it the best is Florida. Their leading scorer, Walter Clayton Jr., was from Iona. They have Will Richard was from Belmont. Sam Alexis was from Chattanooga. They got Ruben Chinyelu, who Rutgers was in on a while ago, Washington State. You have also Elijah Martin from FAU. None of these guys were from Power 5 programs. And they're number 1 seed and could win the national title. So you can do it in a number of ways. Now, the good news here is that things can turn around really quick because of player evaluations, because of the transfer portal. I expect Rutgers to turn over a lot of spots. If obviously the revenue sharing does begin, they will have a good amount of money. They should have 3+ million. Then you have the million with the Vegas tournament. But listen, it's not like they're at the top in terms of money they're going to have to spend. If those numbers make you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. But, there's going to be Big East programs, there's going to be Big Ten programs working double that. And that's just the reality of the situation. Now, that can't be an excuse. Steve Pikiell's got to figure something out. And it's getting back to an identity, but also getting back to a defensive identity with a modern adjustment offensively. Looking at, and do I hope that he hires a offensive-minded assistant that can rework things? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But there's a difference between hiring an offensive tactician and changing your offensive strategy. Now, obviously, running plays, having a system is paramount to that. But at the same time, right, Rutgers is still not playing in a modern way in terms of taking so many long twos, right? I looked it up. Rutgers, 27% of their shots from the floor this year were not from the rim or behind the arc. And that is not a modern approach. I looked up Michigan, I looked up Alabama, 2 of the most modern offensive philosophies in the country. Dusty May, Nate Oates, 2 of the most modern offensive coaches and top coaches there are. And they shot this year 11% and 13%. Alabama 11%, Michigan 13% away from the rim or inside the arc. So mid-range to long twos, right? Rutgers shot double that, 27%. Over 40% of their twos was away from the rim. That is not a sound offensive philosophy in this day and age. And that has to change. Now, Does it change with an offensive assistant, or does it change just with, getting the players you want for the defensive end, but looking to run more, looking to press more, looking to get out in transition and get to the rim more? You're going to kick out threes. Obviously, if you just dribble, you don't have playmakers on offense, you're going to settle for some poor twos, right? And that's what happened with Rutgers yet again, even with Dylan and Ace. And we know Ace loved to take contested threes. He actually shot a decent clip, 46-2. But the bottom line is, as a team, if you look at those shot charts after games, that Michigan game when Rutgers lost at the buzzer, you look at that shot chart, that's an indictment of how the offense has not evolved. And again, it's not seeing this team change, whether it's personnel in terms of how they're playing, not correcting things, and just the philosophy of the offense. It really feels, yes, offensively they were better than they've ever been, but that's because you had two NBA players on the team. When they go away, is it like the year before when they had three of the worst 2-point shooters in the country and Rutgers just settled for poor shot after poor shot because they couldn't generate good looks at the rim? They couldn't generate open looks from three. They didn't have shooters behind the arc to make them. So there's some major concerns here in terms of the roster rebuild. I mean, they obviously need a rim defender. They need a point guard to run the show. They need shooters. They need wing defenders. They need to be more athletic. They need more mentally tough players. They need everything. And they don't have the budget for everything. So you're going to have to maximize your decisions. And overall this year, they certainly had some bad luck with the injuries. I think in terms of them not getting over the hump, I mean, there was a point in the season towards the end where if you looked at if just a few final possessions and 3 or 4 games went different, the whole outlook would have been different. But this team could never generate positive luck. They can never generate breaks, right? And that's unlucky, but it's also what bad teams do, right? Bad teams are unable to kind of get over themselves and correct their own mistakes, and they keep making the same mistakes. And that goes back to coaching. And the biggest thing with Pikiell that I had a bone to pick this year is rotations, right? I mean, he never tightened his rotations. He kept playing everybody, more or less. Yes, he limited minutes for some guys, but you don't need to it's not Little League. Not everybody has to play 2 innings. And that to me was, I said before the season, he was going to have to push a lot of buttons. It's going to be the hardest season of his career. And could he push the right buttons? And unfortunately this year he did not. The majority of the time he did not. And it was almost like, I don't know. It's not that he was afraid to make a decision, but he didn't know what decisions to make. So he just threw everything against the wall to see what would stick. And not a lot stuck. And that is a hard truth about this season, is that when you are playing an 11-man rotation in February, that's a failure. That's a coaching failure. And I get the dynamic early on with the transfers and not going to the young guys right away. But at some point, I think he still could have done it sooner. I think there are some positives. Lathan Somerville did show some development. I think Jay Young has been a positive there. Dylan Grant was, showing a lot of positives as well. Bryce Dortch is certainly intriguing. Still too early to tell, I think, but certainly has some potential. I thought JaMychal Davis, got better as the year went on. I don't think he's a starter for next year. I don't think he should be. If he is a starter, then I think that's a little bit concerning. But I think he is, if he's in that 8-9-man rotation off the bench, I thought he improved his game quite a bit down the stretch. Now, will he leave? We don't know. How many players will stay? We don't know. Obviously, I want to see Dylan Grant stay. I'd like to see Somerville stay. You have to surround them with some real playmakers, with some, defensive size. They have to rebound better. Jeremiah Williams has eligibility left. I don't know. It was a tough year for him, and I think maybe it's a good fresh start for both parties if he leaves. We'll see what happens there. So there's a lot of questions. We don't know what's going to happen yet. But I think for Steve Pikiell, you have to show some real urgency here, because after 3 down seasons, if you're going to have a fourth down season with a new AD, when a new AD is in charge, regardless of how long your contract goes, you're putting yourself in serious jeopardy. And I think you have to make every decision this offseason with extreme urgency, like you are coaching for your job next season. Whether that angers you, whether that, you resent that fact. I've been disappointed by his kind of resentment towards fans that have believed in him a long time. I think that sometimes the program tends to overvalue the lunatic fringe and the minority, and they don't focus on the majority of the fan base that truly supports and wants to see Steve Pikiell be successful here. And that's why I say all the things I do. I'm not trying to do a hatchet job or, talk badly about a lot of people I respect within this program, which I do. We all want the best for this program, and I want to see them achieve their best again. But wins and losses is what it comes down to. And to continue the same approach, to not adapt as this world is changing so fast, I think would be a critical error. And ultimately, it's going to make it that much harder to turn things around next year and beyond. And with a new AD coming in, whether you have the resources or not, you have to make the most of the resources you have. And you have to go out there and you have to get more. You have to broaden your scope. You got to get more money in to help you, but you have to get new minds, new ideas. I talked about the meeting of the minds in the offseason, bringing in former players, bringing in business people, bringing in donors, bringing in people in the community, bringing in fans. Like, this can work, but there's got to be some serious brainstorming here. And it can't just be the status quo, and it can't just be the same old network. I really hope that Steve Pikiell challenges himself to think out of the box and to really go out there and rebuild this roster in a way that it's the identity of how he wants to play basketball, but at the same time evolving too. Because you can't rely on winning every game 64-62. I mean, look at Houston, one of the most dominant defensive and rebounding teams in the country, but they win games 85-80. They win games 95-90. So you got to be able to have versatility. And the thing I've been most disappointed about the last 2 years, I think, with the team is the lack of mental toughness, the lack of leadership on the floor. And that's harder to find when you don't have 4 or 5 year guys. I get it. But you got to target older guys in the portal that can bring that to the program. And it's hard. But guess what? It's hard for everybody. And I think the woe is to us. It's hard. It's hard. Yes, it's hard. That's why you get paid what you do. That's why you have the opportunity that you have to be successful. And if you're not, unfortunately, whether it's next year, the year after, eventually there's going to come a time where you no longer have the opportunity. And I just hope that they look at it in a real way and look this at as an opportunity to change and to improve. I rambled. I don't know if I covered everything I wanted to cover, but I think that this program, I've been very upset about the state of things, and I just want to see them succeed. But at the same time, when things aren't working, they aren't working. And I hope that they can learn from the lessons that this year was, because this is going to be a stain on the Steve Pikiell era. This is going to be a season that fans take to the grave that, they will mention at the end as a failure. It's just reality. You have to accept this season as a failure as much as you accepted the success when you had that 3-4 year run of success. Guess what? That's 3 years ago now. And you have to do something about it. Or worst case, things bottom out next year. And then it's not even a hard decision for the new AD. So, a lot to talk about this offseason, a lot to think about this offseason. But overall, the state of affairs, it's not good. It's concerning. If you're a real Rutgers fan, asking for change, expressing concern, that's our right as fans. and it's critical towards voicing our opinions towards positive change. And that's what I try to do here. Thank you so much for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful Podcast.